These are the Commander cards most worth buying for the month of October.
I'm Mia, and I like tuning up my decks.
I'm BZ, and I love spooky season. We're the Nitpicking Nerds. We're supported by Cool Stuff Inc. You can support yourself and us at the same time by using code
NERDS
at checkout to save 5% 3D hand, 5% on your order.
We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
You can use our EU and US link in the description below to buy some sleeves, and you help out the channel a little bit.
Yeah, we're also sponsored by Moxfield, who you'll see later in an ad that you won't be able to predict. And I want to wish you a happy birthday to everyone whose birthday is today, because we make videos every day, one video per birthday.
Absolutely. Every day, you're getting a birthday wish.
Every single day. Okay, these are the cards that we scoured all of Magic. You know, we looked through every card every time, and we wanted to tell you that these are the most worth buying right now. For their price, I think these are great deals. I'm not saying go speculate and buy 1,000 of them, but I am saying if you had your eye on them, now's the time to buy one or two for some Commander decks because they're great.
We're saying that it's worth it. They've been worth the money to us. So if you have really liked them or are thinking about them, we highly recommend them.
Like with our first one, Doom Whisperer. He's a $5 card. It's 3 black for a 6/6 Flampler. Pay 2 life, Surveil 2. I love that there's almost no rules text on this card. It's so simple. It's a nice chunky body. You know, it'll at least block and attack well. That's not the most important thing, but I'd rather have a 6/6 than a 1/1 and pay 2 life Surveil 2. That's actually pretty silly. When you pass the turn and then right before your turn, you go, well, I've got a Living Death in my hand. I'll pay 30 life.
I really like the fact that it's not just synergistic with graveyard decks. It's not just synergistic with life gaining. It's just good card selection, right? Like
Yeah.
I put this in Kalia, and I'm really excited to play with it more, but the few times I have had it on the field, it's been so nice just to toss a bunch of stuff I don't need into the graveyard.
Yeah, it's kind of perfect. It's like a castable card. It's not one of those 8 mana demons that you're like, I hope I reanimate it or I'm going to have trouble casting it. It's pretty darn castable. It gives you a lot of selection. Really what I want to do, though, is rip through my library. I want to surveil like 10 at least right away and just throw things in the graveyard. Worst case scenario, you find a card that you really, really want, and then you can still surveil a couple times, throw the bottom card in the graveyard every time, and get a ton of value. I like Doom Whisperer a lot, and all this is for $5. It's not like we're talking about a $20 card.
Yeah, Doom Whisper, $5, and also just the paying of the 2 life. No matter how you cut it, the cost is not bad.
And we're going to jump on over to the next one. It's Aggravated Assault, a $3 card. It's 2 and a red for an enchantment, 3 red, untap all creatures you control. After this main phase, there's an additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase. Activate only as a sorcery. So for 3 mana, you get nothing. But then, after that, for installments of 5 mana, which can be repeated and activated multiple times, you get extra combats. And this used to be really expensive.
How much was it?
It was at least 10. I don't want to go and say it was more than that, but I know that right now it's $3.
It has really cute art too. This is the reprint in Enchanting Tales. It's what's brought the price down so much. So it's a really good pickup for the price.
Yeah, it actually does infinite combo with some things like Sword of Feast and Famine. If you connect with somebody, untap all your lands, well, all of a sudden you now have 5 mana to pay to do that all again and just continuously get the trigger. Nature's Will, I think, is another enchantment that does basically the same thing. And it just lets you chain stuff. But even if you're not going infinite, there's other cards. It's like, oh, Goldspan Dragons in my deck. Well, this just kind of says, instead of 5 mana, you can pay 3 mana and just beat down even harder.
I mean, I know a lot of the commander decks in the lower to mid powers are combat based, and they're not focusing on combo. So even if you don't have those combo synergies in your deck, it's still a great pickup.
Yeah, we've only really played decks that end with combat. So I think for some of our decks, this could be a nice little pickup of like, hey, it's an investment. You do got to pay some mana for nothing. But once you activate it, you're getting your return, hopefully.
The cost isn't that much to put into the effect, so I think you'd only need to wait a turn or so.
All right, this next one, it's a card I've just been playing in more and more decks, and it's going to sound weird, but I'm just going to say it. It's Lotus Petal. It's a $17 card. It's 0 mana for an artifact, and you sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color. Now, I don't know. This one's a little tricky. I don't know if I count this as fast mana, because I don't know if I would count Dark Ritual as fast mana or Pyretic Ritual as fast mana. It's a one-time deal. And you're going to generate 1 mana for free. Now, I love this with any commander that has any sort of card draw at all, because if you get it out a turn sooner, the commander is going to replace itself when it enters or at your end step or something, and now you're just like, oh, I feel like I just took an extra turn.
I mean, you call it a ritual for a reason. We're not calling it fast mana, and I'm not sure if I'd really expect people to tell us if we asked, like, do you have fast mana in your deck to bring up Lotus Petal? That being said, though, I do think it's a higher power card. We've been putting it in our decks that run a little bit higher, especially not the budget decks, obviously,
No.
but, you know, the ones where we want to win on turn 6, 7, 8, we have been putting it in.
Yeah, if you're trying to upgrade a deck and you just want to add more power into it, if your commander can draw cards in any way, highly recommend Lotus Petal. I mean, maybe it sounds a little silly, but it's just a card I've been turning to more. I think at first I was like, it's basically a ritual, but it feels a little different than those, and I've just been liking it. That's all I can say. I'll tell you, $17, not bad for this card, especially when you look at some of the other artifacts that generate mana right away.
Also, the treatments. BZ and I, this might be controversial, we don't love the old bordered, like, brown type artifacts, and we like the newer ones, and there have been a set of newer ones released when they did the promos of MagicCon Vegas, and I think it's going to be at some of the other MagicCons too.
Yeah, so just keep an eye out for it. I think it looks really nice. So Lotus Petal, turns out it's a good Magic card. Who knew? What's next?
Next is Lauren of the Third Path at $5 for Tuna White, 2/1 Vigi. When she enters the battlefield, destroy up to one target artifact or enchantment, and if you tap her, you and a target opponent draw a card. This is one of the favorites of both of us. It's good utility, and it has the card draw, and it can get a little political depending on who you pick.
Yeah, it's kind of what I look at as strictly better Reclamation Sage, because it does exactly what Reclamation Sage does, and it has Vigilance. So great. Good for you. You can flicker it, reanimate it, get the trigger multiple times. It's amazing. But then, if you are desperately needing cards, or you want to forge an alliance, or you want to help the table find a board wipe, there's just more words on this thing, and you can make multiple people draw a card, which is normally bad, but I think having it as a controlled, extra ability that you don't rely on, you don't play the card for this ability, but having the extra ability just makes it that much better.
Yeah, I think we would play it anyways because Rex Sage is just non-Vigi stapled on without the attack.
I would play white Rex Sage, yeah.
Yeah, so of course it's just gravy with the tap ability.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter that it's legendary. Like, it being legendary is not a downside, but it actually could be an upside for other decks that are like, oh, I care about legends, and I can reanimate legends, and I want to give counters on legends. Well, here you go. Lauren is amazing. It used to be like $7 or $8, so it's down a little bit. I said it was worth it at $8, so of course I'm going to tell you $5 is the right price.
Yeah, I was buying it at $7 and $8, and I was like, ooh, like if it was a little bit cheaper, this would feel a little bit better. And I think $5 is a good price for it.
Next is a long-standing Nitpicking Nerd's favorite. It's Stinging Study. It's 4 and a black for an instant. You draw X and you lose X, where X is the mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone, and this is a $4 card.
I think this is a great one. I mean, as someone who personally plays commanders that usually have 4 or above mana, like CMC, it always draws me a lot of cards, and it's just really nice to have, especially at instant speed.
Yeah, the instant speed is super nice. This kind of does like a weird ad nauseum impression, but it doesn't require you to build your entire deck around something. It just checks at what your commander is. If your commander costs 5 or more, I think you should really look at this as a powerful card draw option. It's a little pricey, but you're getting what you pay for. Like, if your commander is 8 mana, 5 mana draw 8, that's so far above the rate that you're paying, especially when people are out here playing Read the Bones and Ancient Craving, which is like 3 mana draw 2 or 4 mana draw 3. If this is 5 mana draw 4, it's kind of on par with those, and anything and above, I think this card's great.
Yeah, I play a lot of colors in my decks usually, so I like to do like the Painful Truths 3 mana this, and then a couple turns later do this for 5 mana. So I'm just getting a bunch of cards and with both of them, and I don't know, I just think this really rounds out a deck nicely.
Yeah, sometimes you can have some awkward, like, oh, what card draw do I play in here? I know I want something, and I know I have options, but I'm not sure. Well, if you've got like a random 6 mana commander, or you have partners and one of them's like 6 mana or 7 mana, definitely Stinging Study is what you want. And it's a $4 card. Like, this much card draw seems like it should cost more than $4, so I'm pretty happy to play it.
On to the next one with Auron Frostfang for $3, 3 green, a 2/6. Attacking creatures you control have Death Touch. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. This is like utility. This like helps keep your creatures alive. It's really good for chipping and damage. I think no matter what, you're getting upside, whether like your little creatures die and it kills one of their bigger things, or you're just getting cards out of it and pinging them for a couple damage here and there.
Yeah, it gives your creatures like the evasive or, like utility ability, and then pays you off when your opponent goes, no, I don't want to block that one. I don't want to trade with your 2/2. I don't want to block your Lauren of the Third Path because it has Death Touch. So then they take damage and you go, oh, great. I'll take an upside anyway, thanks. I don't just, with Bow of Nylea, you go, well, I hit damage, that's nice. But this is like, nope, here's everything you've ever wanted. It's only 5 mana. It's a huge butt randomly on a snake. It doesn't really make any sense flavorfully. But this card used to be like $26. It is now $3. It really can't be any lower than $3 and be on a most worth buying list because then it'll be a budget bomb. So this card, I think this is maybe, of all the cards on this list, the most worth buying because it's finally down to an affordable price, and I love it.
I'm actually surprised that Commander Masters brought the price of this one down so far because certain ones, like the free spells and the medallions, brought it down a bit, but this one just nuked the price
Just
almost
killed
to
it.
the ground.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm so happy to play this. I like this better than like Toski. Certain decks, it can be better than Guardian Project and Beast Whisperer. You just got to know what your deck wants. If you've got a lot of tokens running around, this card's fantastic.
This was one of the hypest cards from New Capenna. Ledger Shredder, $7. I'm surprised to have ever seen it this low. 1 in a blue for a 1/3 flyer. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, it connives. And that's like, I remember these were going for $25 each. It was like $1 in the beginning, and then it shot up to $25 so quickly.
Yeah, everybody slept on it. Everybody missed the boat. And now, I don't like to think of it as a dollar card that costs $7. It was a $25 card that now costs $7. This card is pretty much as good as people were hyping it up to be. Even if your deck has no synergy, because this card asks almost nothing of you, it just starts churning through your library, putting cards in your graveyard. Maybe you have Madness synergies as a bonus. It gets bigger too, so it's kind of like a 2-mana 4/6. And it just does a little bit of everything. I love Ledger Shredder a lot, and I have it in a deck, and it's plays great every time.
Yeah, he plays it in Oscar, and the madness definitely helps, especially with the connive. But it's just nasty on its own. No one's going to use targeted removal on this for the most part.
It rides the line.
Yeah, unless there's nothing else on the field, because there's usually a bigger threat than it, and you only paid 2 mana to bring it down. Like, so it can come out really, really quickly.
Yeah, it's like it's got Fairy Mastermind vibes where like, what deck do I play this in? Well, obviously, if you have Madness synergies, cool. Maybe +1/+1 counter synergies too, but it doesn't ask anything of you. You could just put this in literally any blue deck that wants a creature, and it's going to have a lasting impact on the game, and it's going to trigger over and over. And your opponents are going to eventually start going, you have a 5/7? You drew like 6 cards, and you have so much selection.
Absolutely. There's just, it gets so big and it only usually gets swept up, or if, someone surprise blocks it or something like that. But there's so much value in it incrementally.
For 2 mana, you definitely get your money's worth and your mana's worth. Let's go to one of my favorite slugs. It's Toxrill the Corrosive, $12, 7 mana, 7/7. At the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. And whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, you get a 1/1 black slug creature token. Of course, they found a way to put more words on it because you can pay blue-black and sacrifice a slug to draw a card. Because that was the one thing this card was missing was, hey, what if I'm out of gas?
Yeah, I was going to say, that was so many words. Do you need a breath?
No, I do not. We didn't even cut during the reading, if you check back.
Absolutely
I did not need a breath. But this card is like one of the best reanimation targets in the format, full stop, almost no matter what power level you're playing at. It is a one-sided board wipe if they do not kill it in like a turn and a half, which is not that many turns. And then you just start pooping out 1/1s that you can then sacrifice to draw cards if they still haven't killed Toxrill.
This is what you save your Swords and Path to, because if they can reanimate it, they're just going to keep bringing it back and looping it if you kill it once, if it gets swept up in a board wipe. And then everything else is just going to die in response. Like, nothing sticks, and just the drawing a card later, that's just gravy. That's just... It didn't need that. It's already good as is.
I think about paying $12 for this, and it's really a card that says if it sticks in play, your opponents can't play the game in a meaningful way. Most decks have 20 plus creatures. Well, they're now all virtually invalidated because anything with 4 toughness isn't even going to survive until their next turn. So they might as well not cast it. Anything with more than that better have a pretty sweet ability because it's going to die about a turn later or less. This thing dominates the board. It demands an answer.
I love the fact that it is slime counters on the creature itself, and so if he leaves, the slime counters still stay on your creatures, but they just aren't like active, let's say, until he comes back.
Yeah, so if you bring it back, now it's like, oh, I don't have to wait for this 5 slime counters to be on because they're already there. Your creatures are shrunk, and now they're going to die sooner.
Yeah, if there's multiple Toxrills on the field too, they get multiple.
Yeah, you obviously aren't going to control both Toxrills, but they do stack pretty miserably. don't, because like even then, when they start making 1/1s, the 1/1s die to the other Toxrill, and then it's just like a complete nightmare. I don't want to keep track of that, but just play one Toxrill and win the game for $12.
Another way to help you win the game is using moxfield.com, the best way to build a deck online. We love it. It really helps us see our decks and the synergy and the costs of all the cards that we have, and really help us formulate a great game plan.
Yeah, you got a blue-black Reanimator deck, all right? You've got your Ledger Shredders. They could be personally tagged to say looting or card graveyard fillers. You don't have to name the tag something that sloppy. But also, you can have a tox rule and say, these are my reanimation targets. So when you want to sort the deck differently and view it in terms of what puts cards in the graveyard, what reanimates, what goes to column A and column B, you now have a much clearer idea of what your deck can do. And you can see, oh, I didn't have enough ways to fill the graveyard. My reanimation deck was lacking. Only Moxfield can do that for you.
I love the fact that it sorts in multiple ways. You could do like lands, sorceries, instants, whatever, or it could be mana value, or could just be by color. I think that no matter what you're looking for, Moxfield can do it amazingly for your deck.
Yeah, and I know you're using Redacted Website, and you think, I've been using Redacted Website for years. That's actually not the best reason to stay with Redacted Website. I would say, don't just use what you've been using, use what everyone says is the best. So let's go to what everyone says is the best land in Pioneer, but we're going to play it in Commander 2. Nykthos Shrine of Nyx, $25 for a legendary land that taps for a colorless, or you can pay 2 and tap to choose a color and add amount of mana to that color equal to your devotion to that color. If I have 5 green pips among my permanents, it taps 2 and itself and makes 5 green mana. That's mana positive, and you didn't really do much work.
You see this, and it slimes down on the field, and you go, oh no, something big is going to happen. Because no one's ever playing this and just like, oh, I don't know, just had a couple dorks around, and it's going to tap for maybe 3. Like, no. This comes down, and it always taps for like 10.
Yeah, let's be real. Every single monocolored deck in the format that is not restricted by budget wants to play this card, because it enters untapped and it makes a mana. It doesn't really have any downside for you. The fact that it's legendary, not a downside. This card can be tutored up, can be churning out giant X spells, or even just used to cast 4 spells in a turn, which your other opponents are not going to be able to do. It's a land that can help win you the game over 2 or 3 turns, and opponents are going to have a hard time answering it because it's a land.
I don't use land destruction much, but I do run a couple destroy target permanents spells, and this is one of the lands that I would target with it, along with Field of the Dead, of course.
Of course, yeah, the best land ever. So this one actually got a reprint in the Angels deck, so it went from like $30 to $25. I would tell you it's worth it at $30. But we got an extra $5 discount, so go buy it on coolstuff.com before the $5 discount runs away and it sees more play in Pioneer or something.
I usually don't like Planeswalkers, but this one is so good. Teferi, Master of Time, $5, 2 blue, and it comes in with 3 loyalty. You can activate his loyalty abilities anytime you could cast an instant, so that's every turn. +1, draw a card, then discard a card. -3, target creature you don't control phases out. And -10, take 2 turns extra after this one. And I don't usually see the -10 go off, but that -3 and +1, it doesn't matter that you never get the ulti, because that's so much value.
In my experience, I've got the ultimate multiple times, which I cannot say for most Planeswalkers in the format. And the +1 and -3 just makes everything so awkward. If you thought Ledger Shredder was filtering, this is a guaranteed filter every single turn. And as soon as he's going to be threatened by a 5/5, you just go, oh, well, okay, well, instead of dying, he's going to lose 3 loyalty. And I'm going to disrupt your game plan a little bit. This card is messed up. I think it's one of the best Planeswalkers in the entire format. I think it's criminally underplayed. Elspeth Sun's Champion sees more play than this card. I think this card is busted. It's so annoying.
It's one of those cards where when you look at it, you're like, that's not so bad. And every time it's across the field from you, you go, oh, this is a headache.
Yeah, it's never a threat in your head until you see it in play and you're like, well, what are we going to do? Every time I've played this card, the entire table gangs up on it, and it still doesn't die most of the time.
It's so hard to die because you have so much. You're activating it every single turn. It already comes with 3 loyalty, so immediately it goes to 4. So the next turn, if someone tries to attack it, you can just phase it out, and you go, oh, okay, next turn after that, just keep building loyalty, It's just crazy.
Next, what would any list made by the Nitpicking Nerds for any reason be without an MDFC? This one is Valakut Awakening. It's 2 and a red for an instant. Put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards +1, and obviously on the other side, it's a tapped red land, and it's $5.
It's never a dead draw because, some of the ones that are a little bit more costly can be a dead draw in the beginning if you don't need that land. But this 3 mana, you can pay that at almost any point, and it's always good to put those cards back and get cards you actually want.
Yeah, this actually, the card like Valakut Awakening kind of just fixes your entire hand. I'll keep any hand with Valakut Awakening and 3 lands, because even if you've got 7 lands in your hand after you've drawn a couple cards, if something went terribly wrong, you just put the whole thing back or 5 of them back, draw 6 cards. And the fact that it doesn't push you down a card is nice too. Like you could always just pay 2 and a red to draw a card. This kind of has cycling if you really wanted to. This is one of the better MDFCs. It really is. It does not get enough credit.
A land coming in tapped is usually a detriment for MDFCs, but I think this is still worth it because that's such a cheap ability.
Yeah, it's an instant, so it can trigger your prowess type abilities. It draws cards. It can draw many cards at a time, so it has extra synergies with that. And it can really save your butt. It kind of like is a super MDFC because when you don't want a land, it's not a land. But when you don't want all of your lands, it's replacing all of your lands. It's like almost the MVP of MDFCs.
That was a lot of letters. I love it though. And like this one, I also love. 1,000-Year Elixir, $6, 3 mana for an artifact. You can activate abilities of creatures as though they had haste. 1 and tap it to untap target creature. I have this in Lathril, and I've gotten multiple activations because of this.
Yeah, Elf Ball decks rejoice. Anything that wants to like tap to make mana or tap to put things out and generate advantage. Now you're doing it a turn sooner because they have haste. In terms of activating abilities, and you can do it an extra time for whatever your best activated ability is. This card is I've seen in a lot of decks that just start generating and snowballing this value. I know Magnus Lucia Kane, if that's her name, I know she goes ham sandwich with this card, and it can do some damage.
Yeah, nowadays in Commander, we're really not playing any just vanillas or anything, and often they are tap effects, so this is really good to have stapled onto an artifact.
Yeah, mostly where you're going to see this is your Elf Ball, Mana Dorks, Priest of Titania, all of the like maybe Somberwall Sage, just creatures that make a bajillion mana, and then you're going to start untapping them and making even more mana, and then just generating some giant threat or giant X-Spell or a million little dudes that all replace themselves, and then you combo off.
That's really crazy. MVP also in my Elf Ball deck though, Quest for Renewal, $4. 1 in green enchantment, whenever a creature you control becomes tapped, you put a quest counter on it. If there's 4 more quest counters on it, untap all creatures you control during each other player's untap step. This comes out so quickly. I've gotten this way sooner than Seedborn, and just I've gotten those activations that much quicker because of it.
I'm pretty surprised this was only $4. It went down a little bit. I know it was like $5.50 for a while, but it's just kind of like I think a little bit slept on, even though it is a $4 uncommon. People went crazy for Seedborn Muse as soon as Prophet of Crux was banned, and then it was just like the biggest thing and everybody wants it in every deck all of a sudden. But there's not enough love for Quest for Renewal, which is in a lot of decks the exact same thing or the best part of that ability for 2 mana. I think people don't realize that whenever a creature you control becomes tapped, just means for any reason. For Convoke, for attacking, for making mana, it just triggers so easily. 4 has been such a trivial amount to get on this card that I actually like to crank it up a little bit. I like to continue putting quest counters on it because it technically never stops. So even if you have the 4 counters and you tap 6 more creatures, it should now have 10 counters on it. That's what I like to do.
I'm pretty lazy about keeping count of my counters, so I don't do that. But this is really nice because I like the fact that it doesn't get swept up in your creature-based board wipes.
Yeah,
so,
it's even like it's cheaper to cast in Seedborn and it's stickier.
Yeah, and the fact that is like people usually don't know how dangerous it is until it's too late and you've gotten multiple activations of whatever it is that you're trying to activate, and they're like, oh no, that came down turn 2. That's actually really good.
Yeah, keep your eye on this one. I like it for the like budget builds, like a $50 or $100 deck. I like this a lot for those. Just pick up a Quest for Renewal, put it in your trade binder, and then you can thank me 2 weeks from now when you go, oh, I want to build this so-and-so deck.
Okay, this next one, we just got our butts handed to us at a con recently with it. Time Sieve, $6. Blue and a black, and you tap it and sack 5 artifacts, you take an extra turn. This combos off so beautifully in even budget decks. This is such a big win con.
Yeah, this card is kind of in that Lotus Petal category. It's like it's a higher power card for sure because you're going to start chaining extra turns. But this series isn't limited to just jank or cards that are surprisingly good. This card is just amazing. It's $6, and I want you all to know that it's only $6. Tivit was where we got completely rocked by this because, of course, Tivit basically goes infinite with this by itself as long as you can connect with him because he makes 5 tokens, everyone's voting, and then you have all the turns to draw more artifacts, to chain more things, to put more things into play. It's not only good with Tivit, it's good with any artifact generating deck, for any reason.
I mean, there's so much artifact token generation lately. Power stones, treasures, clues,
Blood.
food, blood, It's really easy to get this activated if you want to, or if you and it's really easy to slot in if these are the colors that your commander's in.
Yeah, and it's 2 mana, and the cost doesn't require any mana. So you can take a huge turn, put a bunch of artifacts in play, then play Time Sieve, sacrifice 5 tokens. Let's say you don't even have an infinite on board. You stack 5 tokens. Great. Take an extra turn. You just did it for 2 mana. That's Time Walk. Now you can untap and generate more tokens to hopefully get up to 5 again to just take another turn. All the while you're beating down and you're drawing cards and you're killing opponents' creatures. This card's amazing. $6 for an infinite turn engine is pretty fair.
I have a friend who always says the extra turn spells in his deck. He's like, oh, it might just be drawing cards because I've got nothing in my hand. I'll still sack 5 clues to draw an extra card and see what happens, right?
Sometimes it's worth it.
BZ's seen this a little bit more in play than I have, but it's still so nasty. Scourge of Valkis for $2. 2 red for a 4/4 flyer. When it or another dragon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals X damage to any target where X is the number of dragons you control. And if you pay a red, it gets fire breathing.
Yeah, this card, I'm actually surprised you haven't seen it because I think it's one of the most common win conditions in the entire format because of the dragon decks. I think dragon decks like Dragon, I've played against it a bajillion times. It's a good deck. But the existence of Scourge of Valkis and Dragon Tempest add an extra layer to that deck where it's no, you can't just leave them alive because they're going to spew out 12 permanents. 5 of them are going to be dragons, and you're going to take 50 damage, and you're just going to die. Scourge of Valkis is that extra layer of almost like a combo of a non-combat damage. It's like the Grey Merchant of Dragons is what it is, and I'm sick of it, but it's really, really good, and it gets me every time, and you got to watch out. This is why you got to kill the dragon players, even if it looks like they don't have a board, because they have this in their deck, and they will get you with it.
I think the reason I haven't seen it as much is because the people I play against the dragons is oh, Terror of the Peaks, or Brain Stealer Dragon, It's
Terror of Peaks, honestly, lump that in too, but that's $30.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's still dangerous, but I think that people are playing all these flashy effects, and this is $2, so it kind of, I'm not going to say flies under the radar, but people are so happy to play their really flashy cards first, right?
Yeah, I mean, this used to be more expensive, but it got some reprints, putting it down to $2, and I think at $2, if you have a dragon deck that has red in it, you need this card. Dragon Tempest and this. That's the first 2 cards you put in any red dragon deck because they're just that good. And Scourge of Valkis will mess up your opponents, and it's $2.
I never built a dragon deck because I already have vampires from that set and Eminence. You don't want too many Eminence decks. You don't want to look like a pub stomper. That's a joke. But I think that dragons are really fun, and they can just spiral out of control. Like Miriam, for instance.
Yeah.
With a Miriam?
Yeah, I would like to not think about that. But if you want to think about more cards to buy that we would recommend buying, last month's video, still fresh, still relevant. If you got 3 good cards out of this video, you have to go watch that one because you're going to get 3 more cards out of that video. Mia, what's the tip of the day?
Never underestimate a dragon.